Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The twin suns of Sirius cast long, wavering shadows across the endless dunes. Heat shimmered above the sand, distorting the horizon where the vast desert met the crimson sky. This was a world where only the strongest survived, where the sands had witnessed countless battles and swallowed the blood of fallen warriors without a trace. In the shadow of the hovering Carrot fleet, massive ships that loomed like predatory birds against the burnished sky, the blue-skinned nomads of Sirius had carved out their existence. They were warriors born, with eyes the color of molten gold and skin that reflected the azure of their ancient homeworld's long-forgotten seas. Among them, none commanded more respect than the Windblades, an elite squad led by Zara, daughter of Queen Tirana herself. Zara stood at the crest of a dune, her tall, lean figure silhouetted against the setting suns. The wind whipped her silver-white hair around her shoulders and tugged at the ceremonial scarves that adorned her armor. In her hand, she gripped a long spear tipped with a blade that seemed to drink in the sunlight. "Movement ahead," she said, her voice low but carrying to the three warriors behind her. "The water caravan's trail ends here." Corvin, a mountain of muscle and scars, grunted his acknowledgement, his massive hands flexing around the haft of his warhammer. Behind him, the willowy figure of Tarlok checked his blades without a word, yellow eyes narrowed against the sun. Young Saren, barely into her first decade of service, adjusted the sling at her hip, her movements quick and eager. "Strange," Zara murmured, focusing her keen sight on the disturbance below. "Those aren't caravan guards." The scene unfolding at the base of the dune was one of desperate, uneven combat. 7 figures, local marauders by their gear, had surrounded a lone defender. The stranger fought with a fierce determination that caught Zora's attention. He was clearly outnumbered, armed with only a knife and what appeared to be a broken energy weapon, yet he refused to yield. "An off-worlder," Tarlok observed, his tone neutral but his posture suddenly tense. Zara watched as the stranger, a human she realized, ducked under a swing that would have taken his head and drove his knife into his attacker's thigh. He was quick for an off-worlder and clever, using the terrain and the marauder's own bulk against them. But he was tiring, a sheen of sweat visible on his face even from this distance, and a dark stain spread across one side of his strange form-fitting garment. "He defends remnants of his ship," Saren pointed out, her keen eyes spotting the scattered crates half buried in sand. "Food stores, fuel cells. He fights for survival." "With honor," Corvin rumbled. Zara said nothing, watching as the human staggered, nearly falling as one of the marauders landed a glancing blow. Something stirred within her, a feeling she couldn't immediately identify. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. This human, this fragile creature so far from his world, fought as if he had the heart of a carrot. Without conscious thought, she found herself moving, sliding down the dune with practiced ease, her spear balanced perfectly in her grip. Her squad hesitated only a moment before following, spreading out behind her in practiced formation. The human didn't notice their approach, too focused on staying alive. A marauder lunged, and the man barely twisted away, his movements growing sluggish. He wouldn't last much longer. Zora burst into the fray like a desert storm, her spear flashing in the dying light. The first marauder fell before he knew she was there, her blade finding the gap between his shoulder plates. The second turned, eyes widening in recognition of the Windblade's insignia on her armor, but too late. Her spear shaft cracked against his temple, sending him sprawling. The human froze, knife held defensively before him, his pale eyes wide with confusion as the blue-skinned warrior cut through his attackers with effortless grace. Behind her, Corvin's warhammer sent a marauder flying, while Tarlok's twin blades danced, and Saren's sling stones found vulnerable flesh with unerring accuracy. In moments, it was over. The surviving marauders flowed into the desert, leaving their dead behind. Zara turned to the human, studying him properly for the first time. He was tall for his kind, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of the desert sand. His eyes, a startling blue-green, met hers without flinching despite the exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. Blood trickled from a cut on his forearm, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. But he held his ground, knife still raised. "You're weak," Zara said, stepping closer, her spear pointed downward but still ready. "But there's fire in you." A beat passed, a heartbeat in which she made a decision that would change the course of not just her life, but her entire people. "You are my tire." Behind her, her squad went utterly still. Corvin's breath caught audibly. Saren's eyes widened to perfect circles. Tarlok's face remained impassive, but a muscle jumped in his jaw. The human, of course, didn't understand the significance of what she just declared. He glanced between the 4 alien warriors, confusion evident on his features. "I don't know what that means," he said, his voice hoarse from exertion and thirst. "But if you're not here to kill me, I'd appreciate some water." Zara's lips curved in what might have been amusement. She gestured to Saren, who hesitantly approached with a water flask. "It means," Zara said as the human drank deeply, "that I have chosen you as my companion, my equal in spirit if not in strength." She watched him carefully. "Among my people, it is a bond not easily broken." The human lowered the flask, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I'm Liam," he said after a moment, "and I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a pilot whose ship crashed. I need to get to the nearest outpost." "There is no misunderstanding." Zara cut him off, her tone broking no argument. "You fought against impossible odds. You did not surrender. These are qualities valued by the Karat." She stepped closer, close enough that Liam had to tilt his head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "I am Zora, commander of the Windblades, daughter of Queen Tirana, and I have made my choice." Liam swallowed, a flash of fear crossing his features before being replaced by a wary determination. "Look, I appreciate the help, but I don't think." "Commander," Tarlok interjected, his voice tight, "this decision, the Queen will not approve." Zara turned her golden gaze on her second in command. "I do not require my mother's approval, Tarlok." "The law." "I know the law," she snapped. "Better than you." She turned back to Liam. "You are my tire now. You will come with us." Liam tensed, clearly weighing his options. Alone, injured, in an alien desert, his chances of survival without them were slim. "Do I have a choice?" he asked bluntly. Zara's expression softened slightly. "There is always choice, Liam of Earth, but not all choices are wise." After a long moment, he nodded. "All right then. Lead the way, Commander." As they gathered Liam's salvaged supplies and began their journey across the dunes, none of them noticed the small probe droid hovering high above. Its lens focused on their movements, transmitting directly to the Queen's flagship. Queen Tirana's flagship, the Dagger of Dawn, hovered above the capital camp, its massive shadow cutting across the desert like a wound. Within its metal heart, the Queen sat upon a throne crafted from the bones of ancient desert creatures, her long fingers drumming against the armrest as she watched the holographic projection before her. Her daughter, her hair, walking side by side with a human, a fragile, pale-skinned offworlder. The implications made her body rigid with fury. "She called him Tyr," said one of her counselors, an elderly Karat named Vexer, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Before her entire squad, I heard." Tirana said, her voice dangerously soft. She rose from her throne, her tall figure draped in ceremonial armor that clinked softly with each movement. Her face, sharing the same sharp angles as her daughter's, was a mask of controlled rage. "My daughter has always been willful, but this," she gestured sharply at the hologram, "this is an abomination." The War Council shifted uncomfortably. None dared speak until the Queen had finished. "For generations, we have kept our bloodlines pure," Tirana continued, pacing the length of the chamber. "The warrior caste is the backbone of our society, our strength, our future. She stopped, fixing her golden eyes on each counselor in turn. If my daughter, of all people, is permitted to take an off-worlder as Tyr, what message does that send? Perhaps, ventured another counselor hesitantly, it is a diplomatic gesture. The human might have valuable. Silence. Tirana's voice cracked like a whip. She did not choose him for diplomacy. I know my daughter. She turned to stare out the viewport at the sprawling camp below. She is blinded by some misplaced fascination. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She would risk everything I have built. The queen was silent for a long moment, her silhouette stark against the red light of the setting suns. When she turned back, her decision was written in the hard lines of her face. My daughter is blinded, she announced. Kill this human and bring her back to me. The council chambers erupted in murmurs. One of the younger counselors stepped forward, bowing deeply. My queen, with respect, your daughter commands the wind blades. They are among our finest warriors. This will not be an easy task. A cold smile curved Tirana's lips. I am well aware of my daughter's abilities. She moved to a communication panel, impressed a series of commands, which is why I have already arranged for the appropriate assistance. The doors to the council chamber slid open, and a tall figure strode in. Even among the imposing Karat, this warrior stood out. A network of scars crisscrossed his blue face, and where his left eye should have been, a cybernetic implant glowed with a baleful red light. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and the counselors instinctively stepped back as he approached the throne. Rhaegar, the queen acknowledged. You have received my message. The scared warrior inclined his head. I have, my queen. The terms are acceptable. His voice was a rasp, as if his throat, too, bore invisible scars. My hunters and I will track your daughter and eliminate the human. And if she resists? One of the counselors asked. Rhaegar's mechanical eye whirred as it focused. Then she will learn that even though wind blades can cut, they can also be broken. Tirana nodded, satisfied. Go then, and know that the future of our people rests upon your success. As Rhaegar turned to leave, the queen raised a hand. One more thing. Her eyes narrowed. I want this done quickly, before word spreads. I cannot afford dissent among the clans. Understood, my queen. Rhaegar paused at the threshold. There is one more detail that might interest you. According to my sources, there is discontent within the wind blades themselves. Tirana's interest sharpened. Explain. Tarlok, Rhaegar said simply, her second in command. He believes the position of commander should have been his. He resents serving under a woman, even one of royal blood. A calculating expression crossed the queen's face. Approach him. Offer whatever is necessary to secure his cooperation. Rhaegar bowed and departed, leaving the queen to her thoughts. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, cold and distant witnesses to the storm brewing on the desert world below. Liam had never experienced heat like this. Even through the cooling functions of his salvaged flight suit, the twin sons of Sarir beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down his spine as he trudged across the endless dunes. Ahead of him, Zera moved with the easy grace of one born to this harsh environment, her spear balanced across her shoulders. They had been traveling for what felt like days, though Liam's chronometer indicated it had been less than one standard cycle. The Karat required less rest than humans, a fact that was becoming painfully apparent as his legs burned with fatigue and his lungs labored in the thin, dry air. We should stop, Corvin rumbled from behind him. The massive warrior had been watching Liam with what seemed like concern. The off-worlder needs water. Zara halted, turning to assess Liam with those unnerving golden eyes. Can you continue? She asked directly. Liam straightened, pride warring with practicality. I can keep going, he said, though his parched lips cracked as he spoke. A flicker of what might have been approval crossed Zora's features. Stubborn, she observed, but Corvin is right. We'll rest in the shadow of that ridge. She pointed to a formation of red rock jutting from the sand ahead. As they settled in the relative coolness of the rock shadow, Saren distributed water and a type of dried meat that Liam chewed cautiously, finding it spicy but palatable. The young Karat warrior watched him with open curiosity. "How did you come to crash on our world?" she asked, her accent giving the words a musical quality. Liam took a swig of water before answering. "Navigational failure. I was making a supply run to the mining colony on Proxima 4 when the guidance systems malfunctioned. I had to make an emergency landing." He grimaced. "Not my best work." "You survived," Zara commented from where she stood at the edge of their small camp, scanning the horizon. "Many would not have." Liam studied her profile, still trying to understand the strange turn his life had taken. "This tire thing," he said. "You still haven't fully explained what it means." Zara glanced at him, then back at the desert. "It is an ancient custom. A warrior may choose one individual whose spirit complements their own, a partner in battle and in life." Liam nearly choked on his water. "In life? As in then? A mate?" Tarlok supplied coldly from where he sat sharpening his blades. "A spouse, in your terms." "Whoa, hold on." Liam scrambled to his feet, ignoring the protest of his tired muscles. "You're saying you've basically married me without asking." Zara turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. "The choice is made by the warrior, yes, but the bond is not complete until both parties accept it." Her golden eyes fixed on his. "I have chosen you, Liam of Earth. Whether you accept is, as you said earlier, your choice. And if I don't accept?" Liam asked carefully. A shadow passed over Zara's face. "Then you are free to go when we reach the capital camp. I will ensure you have provisions and directions to the nearest outpost." Corvin and Saren exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with this possibility. Tarlok, however, seemed almost pleased by Liam's hesitation. "The commander honors you greatly," Corvin said, his deep voice gentle despite his imposing presence. "It is rare for a Karat to choose a tire outside our own kind." "It's unheard of," Tarlok corrected sharply, "and dangerous. The Queen will not stand for it." Zara's head snapped toward her second in command. "You overstepped, Tarlok." The tension between them was palpable, and Liam found himself in the uncomfortable position of being the cause of what was clearly a significant rift within the squad. He cleared his throat. "Look, I appreciate the honor, but this is a lot to process. Where I come from, people usually date for a while before making this kind of commitment." Saren tilted her head. "Date? Get to know each other," Liam explained. "Spend time together, figure out if they're compatible." Zara considered this. "We have a journey of several days ahead of us," she said finally. "Use this time to decide. I will not press you further." With that, she moved away to confer with Corvin about their route, effectively ending the conversation. Liam sank back down, trying to wrap his head around the situation. Stranded on an alien world, married to a warrior woman with blue skin and golden eyes, being led across a desert to meet a queen who, according to Tarlok, would not be pleased with his existence. "She will kill you, you know." Liam jerked his head up to find Tarlok standing over him, his lean face cast in shadows. "Excuse me." "The Queen," Tarlok clarified, his voice low enough that the others couldn't hear. "When she learns what Zara has done, she will order your death, and Zara's defiance will only make her more determined." A chill ran down Liam's spine despite the heat. "Why are you telling me this?" Tarlok's yellow eyes gleamed. "Perhaps I wish to save you from a painful end. Perhaps I tire of watching my commander make foolish decisions." He leaned closer. "Or perhaps I simply enjoy watching an off-worlder squirm." Before Liam could respond, the warrior straightened and walked away, leaving Liam with a growing sense of dread. He watched as Zara gestured at something on the horizon, her profile strong and determined in the dying light. What had he gotten himself into? The Bloodwind cliffs rose like jagged teeth against the eastern sky, their red stone faces carved by eons of wind into fantastical shapes. It was here, as they picked their way through a narrow pass between towering rock formations, that Rhaegar sprung his trap. The first sign of danger was a glint of metal high above. Saren spotted it, her young eyes sharp. "Commander," she called, but her warning came too late. A chain net weighted with heavy metal hooks descended upon them from the cliff face. Zara reacted with lightning speed, shoving Liam aside and diving clear herself. Corvin was not so lucky. The net caught him across the shoulder, one of the hooks tearing into his thick hide. He roared in pain and anger, ripping at the chains. "Ambush!" Zara bellowed, her spear already in hand. "Form up!" Figures dropped from the cliffs above, landing with cat-like grace despite their heavy armor. At their center stood Rhaegar, his cybernetic eye glowing like a malevolent star in the shadows of the pass. "Zara, daughter of Tirana," he called, his scared face twisted in a grim smile. "Your mother sends her regards." Zara's face hardened. "Rhaegar, still doing the queen's dirty work, I see." The scared hunter spread his hands. "It pays well." His mechanical eye whirred as it focused on Liam. "This is the off-worlder. He doesn't look like much." Liam had scrambled to his feet, the knife he'd salvaged from his crash clutched in his hand. He'd managed to repair his broken blaster enough that it could fire a few shots, and he drew it now with his other hand, though the charge indicator flickered weakly. "Hand him over, Zara." Rhaegar continued, his tone almost reasonable. "That's all your mother asks. Do this, and you can return to your position with no consequences." "You know I can't do that," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding them. Rhaegar sighed theatrically. "I told the queen you'd say that." He raised a hand. "Take them." The hunters charged, weapons gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Zara met them head-on, her spear a blur as she engaged 3 attackers simultaneously. Corvin, having freed himself from the net, swung his warhammer in devastating arcs, keeping a cluster of hunters at bay. Saren darted between the larger combatants, her sling stones finding vulnerable points with deadly accuracy. Liam found himself backed against the cliff face, firing his unreliable blaster at any hunter who came too close. A blast caught one in the shoulder, sending him sprawling, but the weapon sputtered and died after the 3rd shot. He switched to his knife, remembering his combat training from the Earth Fleet. A hunter lunged at him with a serrated blade. Liam ducked under the swing, feeling the wind of it pass his cheek, and drove his knife into the gap between the hunter's armor plates. The alien howled and staggered back, yellow blood seeping from the wound. "Not bad for an off-worlder," came a voice to his left. Liam turned to find Tarlok engaged with a hunter nearby, his twin blades dancing as he parried and struck. "But you won't survive this." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Liam grunted, narrowly avoiding a chain whip that cracked against the rock where his head had been a moment before. The battle surged around them, a chaotic dance of blades and blood. Zara fought her way toward Rhaegar, clearly targeting the leader, but hunters kept interposing themselves between them. Corvin had sustained another wound, this one to his side, but he fought on with berserker strength, his roars echoing off the cliff faces. It was in the midst of this chaos that Tarlok made his move. One moment he was fighting at Corvin's side. The next his blade flashed not at a hunter but at Corvin himself, plunging deep into the big warrior's side. Corvin's eyes widened in shock and betrayal as Tarlok twisted the knife and yanked it free. "The human is here," Tarlok shouted, breaking away from the stunned Corvin and darting toward Rhaegar. "Take him." The battlefield seemed to freeze for a heartbeat as the betrayal registered. Then Zara's face contorted with rage, and she pivoted, her spear lashing out with incredible speed to catch Tarlok as he fled. The blade tore through his shoulder, but he kept moving, the wound seeming to barely slow him as he reached Rhaegar's side. "I fulfilled my part," he gasped, yellow blood streaming down his arm. "Remember your promise." Rhaegar nodded, his mechanical eye gleaming. The wind blades will be yours once this is done. He turned to his hunters. The human. Get him. Now. The hunters surged toward Liam with renewed vigor. Zara fought desperately to reach him, her spear a whirlwind of motion, but there were too many opponents between them. Liam. She called, her voice tight with an emotion he couldn't identify. Stand your ground. Corvin, incredibly, was still fighting despite the grievous wound Tarlok had inflicted. He staggered toward Liam, swinging his hammer with weakening force, but still managing to clear a path. Go on, Commander, he rasped, blood bubbling at his lips. I'll hold them. Zara hesitated, clearly torn between her duty to her warrior and her need to protect Liam. Go, Corvin insisted, planting himself in the narrow pass. This is my choice. A flicker of anguish crossed Zora's face before she nodded once, sharply. Your honor will be remembered, brother. She grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him toward a side passage in the cliffs. Saren followed, tears streaming down her young face as she cast one last look at Corvin. Behind them, the sounds of combat continued, Corvin's battle roars growing fainter as they fled deeper into the maze of the Bloodwind Cliffs. The last they saw of him was his massive silhouette surrounded by shadows, his hammer rising and falling as hunters tried in vain to pass. The oasis appeared like a mirage on the horizon, a splash of impossible green against the relentless red and gold of the desert. Zara approached it cautiously, her spear at the ready, her golden eyes scanning for threats. 3 days had passed since the ambush at the Bloodwind Cliffs. 3 days of hard travel across open desert with minimal rest and dwindling supplies. Zara had pushed them mercilessly, aware that Rhaegar would not be far behind. The wound on her thigh, sustained in their desperate escape, had been hastily bandaged but still troubled her, though she refused to show weakness. Liam watched her with growing concern, and despite their dire circumstances, growing admiration. She drove herself harder than she drove them, taking the first watch and the last, eating less than she allotted to him and Saren, her focus never wavering from their goal. Reaching the capital camp to confront her mother. It appears unoccupied, Zara said finally, indicating the oasis. But we must be vigilant. Rhaegar is clever. Saren nodded, her young face serious beyond her years. The betrayal of Tarlok and the loss of Corvin had hit her hard, but she had risen to the challenge, her sling always ready, her keen eyes constantly scanning their back trail. I'll check the perimeter, she offered, already moving to circle the oasis. Be swift, Zara instructed. We cannot linger here long. As Saren moved away, Zara turned to Liam. How are you holding up, Offworlder? Despite everything, Liam managed a tired smile. Still alive, thanks to you. Something softened in Zara's fierce gaze. You have fought well. Many of my own people would have broken under such strain. I'm pretty sure I'm running on pure adrenaline at this point, Liam admitted. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry about Corvin. And Tarlok's betrayal. Zara's face hardened again at the mention of her second in command. Tarlok will pay for his treachery. Her voice caught just slightly. Corvin died with honor. He will be remembered in the songs of our people. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of loss hanging between them. Then Zara straightened, her commander's mask sliding back into place. We should check your wound, she said, gesturing to the makeshift bandage on Liam's arm, where a hunter's blade had caught him during their escape. Before he could respond, Saren's voice called out from the edge of the oasis. Commander, it's clear. There's fresh water. The relief that washed over Liam was almost physical. The recycled water in their flasks had been growing stale and warm, barely enough to keep them going in the punishing heat. They made their way to the small pool at the center of the oasis, surrounded by straggly vegetation that seemed miraculous after days of nothing but sand and rock. Liam dropped to his knees beside the water, resisting the urge to plunge his whole head in. Drink slowly, Zara warned. Too much at once will make you ill. Liam nodded, cupping his hands to bring the cool water to his parched lips. It tasted better than the finest wine he'd ever sampled on Earth. Saren was refilling their flasks, while Zara remained standing, her spear planted in the sand beside her, her posture alert despite her obvious fatigue. It was Saren who noticed the anomaly first. Her head tilted, her hand freezing mid-motion as she filled a flask. "Commander," she said softly. "Something's wrong." Zara tensed. "What is it?" "The birds," Saren said, pointing to a cluster of small lizard-like creatures with leathery wings perched in the sparse trees. "They're not singing. And they're all facing the same direction." Liam's military training kicked in, and he was on his feet in an instant, his hand going to his knife. Zara had already snatched up her spear, moving to place herself between Liam and the direction the birds were watching. "Rhaegar," she murmured, just as figures materialized from among the dunes surrounding the oasis. They wore the garb of desert traders, but their movements were too precise, too coordinated. Mercenaries disguised to lure unwary travelers, and they had the oasis surrounded. "How careless of me," came Rhaegar's raspy voice as he stepped forward, shedding his trader's disguise to reveal his battle armor beneath. "Did I forget to mention that I control most of the water sources between here and the capital camp?" His mechanical eye gleamed with malicious humor. "It made tracking you so much easier." Zara's grip tightened on her spear. "You've always lacked subtlety, Rhaegar." The scared hunter shrugged. "Subtlety is overrated when you have superior numbers." He gestured, and the mercenaries closed in, weapons drawn. "Now, be reasonable. Hand over the human, and you and the girl can go free." "You know that's not true," Zara replied evenly. "My mother wants me brought back as well." "Ah, but I'm a reasonable man," Rhaegar said, spreading his hands. "I'm willing to tell the queen that you resisted too vigorously, that I had no choice but to eliminate you." His scared face twisted in a cruel smile. "For a price, of course." "Of course," Zara echoed, her tone dripping with contempt. "And what would that price be?" Rhaegar's gaze slid to Saren, who stiffened under his mechanical scrutiny. "The girl. She shows promise. I could use a new apprentice." The rage that flashed across Zora's face was terrifying to behold. "You will not touch her," she snarled, her spear coming up in a fighting stance. "Have it your way," Rhaegar sighed, drawing a wicked-looking curved blade. "Kill them all." The mercenaries charged from all sides. Saren's sling sang as she launched stone after stone, dropping the closest attackers before they could reach them. Zara was a blue blur of motion, her spear carving deadly arcs through the air, keeping the mercenaries at bay with its long reach. Liam found himself surrounded, knife in hand, desperately parrying attacks from 3 directions. He ducked under a sword swing, felt the wind of it pass his cheek, and drove his knife into the mercenary's thigh. The alien howled and fell back, but 2 more took its place. A blade sliced across Liam's forearm, drawing a gasp of pain. He staggered, nearly losing his footing in the loose sand. Another mercenary saw the opening, lunging with a spear aimed at his chest. The blow never landed. Zara appeared between them, her own spear deflecting the mercenary's weapon with a resounding clash of metal. Her golden eyes blazed with fury as she drove the attacker back with a series of lightning-fast strikes. "You're my shield, Tyre," she shouted over her shoulder, never taking her eyes off her opponent. The declaration sent a jolt through Liam. In that moment of desperate combat, something shifted within him. This alien warrior, this fierce, proud woman was fighting not just for her own life, but for his. She had chosen him, and against all reason, he found himself wanting to be worthy of that choice. With renewed determination, he gripped his knife and rejoined the fray, staying close to Zora's back, protecting her flank as she carved a path toward Rhaegar. The mercenary leader had held back from the initial charge, directing his forces from a position of safety at the edge of the oasis. Saren fought with the ferocity of youth, her sling stones finding vulnerable points in mercenary armor with unerring accuracy. But she was being pushed back, step by step, by a hulking mercenary wielding a serrated axe. "Siren," Liam called, spotting her danger. He broke away from Zara, diving between fallen combatants to reach the young carrot's side. His knife found the mercenary's unprotected back, driving deep between armored plates. The mercenary howled and spun, axe whistling toward Liam's head. Siren's stone caught the mercenary square in the eye, causing him to falter just enough for Liam to duck beneath the axe's arc. Another thrust of his knife, this time to the alien's throat, and the mercenary collapsed, gurgling as yellow blood streamed between his fingers. "Thanks," Siren gasped, already reloading her sling. "Stay close," Liam ordered, pulling her toward Zara, who was systematically cutting through mercenaries in her relentless advance toward Rhaegar. The scared hunter, seeing his forces being decimated, finally drew his weapon, a cruel barbed chain that hummed with some form of energy. He swung it in practiced arcs, the links making an ominous buzzing sound as they cut through the air. "Enough games," he growled as Zora approached, bodies of his mercenaries littering the sand around her. "Let's finish this, princess." Zora's face was a mask of controlled fury. "You will die for what you've